Howdy folks, welcome back to Boonedockery. Being new to YouTube, I know there's a lot of things I'm supposed to be paying attention to, and one of which is what my viewers want to see. And the viewer base is very important to YouTubers, and I was pondering this morning while I was drinking my coffee, what do my viewers want to see next? What do they pace back and forth thinking about? I wonder what John's going to do next. Oh, listen, it could be anything. And there's an infinite number of things he can do outside. So, the more I thought about it, put myself in my viewer's shoes, if I was my viewer, I would say, John, you should do another solid fuel video. And I'm like, brilliant, I'll do it. You know, it'll be sort of like the Rocky series or, the Rambo series. It'll be solid fuel stoves part 72. Yeah, it'll be a great series. Perhaps Netflix will pick it up. It'll be great. No, actually what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to do your own do-it-yourself windshield for your solid fuel stoves. I know I've mentioned it a couple times in some of the other videos, but today I'm actually going to sit down and walk you through the paces of making your own. And also we'll do a field test, and that way you can see just exactly how easy they are to use in addition to how easy they are to make. And it's going to maximize your fuel, and it's also going to maximize the efficiency of your stove. Let's go ahead and get started. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the genesis of the idea for creating a windshield for my Esbit stove or any of my solid fuel stoves actually came with the purchase of the BCB Fire Dragon stove. Not going in depth on the Fire Dragon stove or their wonderful fuel, we're going to focus on an accessory that came with the stove. And this is the accessory. A little sheet metal windshield that just clips to the side of the stove, slides right on in, and the stove can fold down into a more focused position for the heat of the fuel to rise up. It prevents any of the wind or air from going through the back and interrupting the efficiency of the flame. It also blocks that heat in, because when we have a pot on top of our stove, that heat wants to leave any opening it can because it's meeting the resistance of the bottom of the pot. This prevents that. What we're going to be doing today is I'm going to show you step by step how to create your own windshield. And the way that we're going to go about doing it, you will be able to do one of these for every single solid fuel stove you own. And the reason I'm saying that because all solid fuel stoves are different shapes and sizes. I'm going to show you how to take the measurements and how to actually produce the windshields for both the open position and the focused heat position. I'm going to go ahead and show you what you need. I'm going to go over a list of the things you're going to need for the project. First of all, you're going to need to have your solid fuel stove. We're going to need this to be able to take measurements from to make our pattern. In order to make the pattern, we're going to need measuring devices. I like to use a ruler and a tape measure. Tape measure is flexible, gets in small places easily. Use the ruler to be able to use on the pattern paper and on the aluminum foil, and it just makes things a lot easier to make straight edges with. We'll also need writing implements. I usually use just a pencil, and I use it on heavy-duty cardstock. I like to use cardstock simply because it's thicker. When I'm tracing the pattern on the aluminum, it will not bend, it will not roll, so I get good crisp lines. Like I said, I use a permanent marker. This just happens to be a Sharpie. I prefer the Sharpies because they have a nice pointed nib. I'm going to be using a black permanent marker so you can see the lines I make. And normally I would use a pencil just in case I make a mistake. I'm going to be able to erase it easily. I'm going to be using a notepad to be able to write down my measurements on. I will also need to have a pair of scissors. And depending on the gauge of aluminum foil you're working with, if you're fortunate enough to be able to get really good thick aluminum foil and you want to use that, it's going to make the job a little easier, make it a little sturdier. You could actually use a pair of heavy duty scissors to do that with. When you are finished making your positives, there's one last step we're going to be taking, and that's going to be making ventilation holes in one of our windshields to allow airflow into it. You can either use a nail, an awl. I use a hole punch, keep them uniform. They look pretty good. And the last thing you will need is either heavy duty aluminum foil or an aluminum baking dish. I got this from the dollar store. This is generic brand. This is a little bit thicker than the heavy duty aluminum foil, but this will definitely do the job. If you get one that's a little better brand, the aluminum is much thicker and it will make a sturdier windshield. Let's get to making the pattern. The first thing we're going to need to do is measure the stove. We're going to put it in its maximum open position because we're going to make a windshield for the maximum open position first. I'm going to measure the height and the width of the area that we're going to be making the windshield for, and that would focus on this area here. So we're going to deal with the height here and the total width from here to here. We're going to be measuring this on the exterior, but actually the bulk of the windshield will actually be going to the inside of the stove. Measuring across, I see that is going to be 9.5 centimeters, 9.5 centimeters. So we'll put that down on our width, 9.5 centimeters. And we're going to measure the height. I'm going to do that from the inside. And considering that I have teeth that come higher than that flange, I'm going to assume that I can go just a little bit higher than the actual height from the interior to the top here. And I'm going to call that 4 centimeters. Now we have our height and our width. Now we're going to do a little math because the measurements we have are just the base measurements for the height and the width. When I actually make the windshield, I'm making it out of a fairly thin material. I want it to be more substantial. So I'm actually going to be folding the aluminum foil 3 times. And in order to hold those folds in place, I'm going to be adding folding tabs. So I'm going to multiply the height of my measurement by 3. That's going to make it 12 centimeters. 12 centimeters. In order to have enough space to create a top folding tab, I'm going to add 1 centimeter. So that's going to make it a total of 13 centimeters. 13 centimeters. I'm going to do something very similar to the width. I will have a folding tab on this side and a folding tab on this side. So I'll be adding 2 more centimeters, which will make the total width 11.5 centimeters. Now, let's make the pattern. With the pre-manufactured cardstock, I'm assuming that my angle is true. We have a true right angle here, and that's going to allow me to make accurate measurements to be able to create my pattern from. Having my measurements, I'm going to measure the width from this edge over, and my width for the measurement for the width is 11.5 centimeters. I'm going to measure over to 11.5, and I'm going to create a TIG mark. If you don't know what a TIG mark is a line that extends from your measuring device in the same direction as the markings on the ruler. So I'm simply going to extend that line up just a small amount. The reason that I'm making a TIG mark as opposed to a dot is that gives me an alignment to where if I have another TIG mark, I can align my straight edge from one to the next to make a perfectly straight line. I'm now going to measure the height. And my measurement for the height is going to be 13 centimeters. Make a TIG mark there. Now I'm going to measure from this TIG mark down 13 centimeters and create another TIG mark. Going back to the bottom, 11.5 centimeters. Align those TIG marks with the straight edge, and I've created another TIG mark. I have 2 TIG marks now that I can align my ruler on and make a perfectly straight line. I have the same for the height as well. I'm just going to create a straight line from one TIG mark to the edge and from the bottom TIG mark to the top. This is essentially going to be the space in which I make my pattern. Like I said, we're going to have folding tabs. There's going to be one folding tab at the top, one on either side. Each one's going to be 1 centimeter wide. I'm going to align my ruler here and create one TIG mark 1 centimeter from the top. We'll go over here and do the same thing. And I'm going to create a line. I'm now going to create the 1 centimeter space I need on either side to make my folding tab. I have a TIG mark there, TIG mark there, TIG mark there, TIG mark there, and connect those TIG marks from the bottom to the top. Now, we're going to pay some attention to this smaller inner rectangle. Our original height was 4 centimeters. So we're going to measure in 4 centimeter increments down to the bottom of the paper. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Move over to the other side, do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I will connect those TIG marks with another line. The bottom line is only going to connect from the inner rectangle one side to the other. The next line is going to go all the way to the outer rectangle to the edge of the paper. These are going to be our side folding tabs. This is going to be our top folding tab. I'm going to cut this out. This is what your pattern should look like. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to remove the edging or the sides from my aluminum baking dish, and I'm going to be using this base as the aluminum that I'm going to create my windshields from. I'm going to go ahead and cut and remove the sides. I've removed the sides from the baking pan. The manufacturer has embossed the base of the baking pan in order to give it a little more structural support. I'm going to remove that simply by using my Sharpie and smoothing those back out. It'll make tracing the pattern much easier. And that is that. I'm going to now lay my pattern on the aluminum foil, and I am going to trace that with my Sharpie. These are fairly inexpensive, so I don't really have to worry so much about the economy of materials. However, if you want to get more out of your aluminum foil, take it as close as you can to the edge without actually having the corners going off of the aluminum foil. I always make as many points of contact with my hand on the pattern as possible in order to ensure that the pattern does not slide. Just using my Sharpie to go around, taking my time, making sure that I get fairly crisp corners. Tracing around. All the way to where I started. Now I have an outline of my pattern. We're going to be making 2 of these. So while you're at it, go ahead and trace it another time. I've now traced my pattern twice. Now I'm going to cut out the aluminum in the shape of the patterns. My 2 windshields are now cut out. I've placed the scraps in the recycling bin. Now I'm ready to turn each one of these into a windshield. We'll start off with one. Our first fold will be folding the aluminum foil bottom to where the corners align perfectly with the 2 corners from our folding tabs. I always try to roll the foil first. Don't attempt to crease it yet until you've made certain that the corners are aligned and are held snugly in position with your fingertips. Once you have that, simply tap it down without creasing it, and then double check the alignment of the corners to the corners of the folding tabs. Once you have identified that those are aligned correctly, you can use your Sharpie to crease that bottom fold. I'm now going to do the same thing by rolling the aluminum upward to where these 2 corners will align with the 2 corners created by my folding tabs. And hold it in place, make sure your alignment is correct. And once it is, press it back and crease with your Sharpie. By folding it into thirds, this is fairly substantial. Now we're going to fold the tabs over on top of the actual sides to hold everything in position. The first thing I'm going to do with that is to gently fold the corner diagonally to where it aligns with the edge of the side. I'll do that on both sides. And you can crease it down with your Sharpie if you desire. We're going to fold each one of the folding tabs inward, both sides, and crease those with our Sharpie. At the top folding tab, we'll fold those corners in as well. And the reason I'm doing this, it creates a safety area to where you do not have a sharp corner of aluminum that can cut you when you are reaching into your stove to take it out to deploy it. Fold that down. And once that's in place, crease it with your Sharpie. And this is an unfinished but folded side. We're going to do this one more time. So once you have this one folded, go ahead and fold the other one, and I'll show you how we're going to finish them off. For the next step, we'll be focusing our attention on the portion of the windshield that has been creased over and does not have the folding tabs on them. It's the plain side. It's important to keep that in mind. Our original width was 9.5 centimeters. So if I were to measure in from the sides a distance of 3 centimeters on either direction, that will provide us with an ample amount of space to attach our windshield to our stove. Go ahead and measure those out, make your own marks. The depth of the fuel reservoir is roughly 1 centimeter. So you will be cutting each one of those lines approximately 1 centimeter. If it's a little more, that's fine. Now, to do a test fit properly, we're going to separate these just a little bit, slide our windshield to the inside of the stove, all the way to the bottom, and press it closed. The height is still below the teeth of the opening sides. It goes all the way to the base. We can pinch and crimp that into a position where that will hold in place. So we have our measurements correct, we have our cuts correct. Now what we need to do is to finish it off by leaving one completely plain and ventilating the second. The last step that we have to do with this particular windshield is we are going to choose one of these, I'm going to pick this one, to be the one that is ventilated. One's going to remain solid, one will remain ventilated. As I said before, you could either use a nail, an awl, a hole punch. I'm simply going to use a hole punch. And I am going to estimate where the center would be. And directly beside it, and to the other side, directly beside it. This is going to allow me to have 3 perforations to allow airflow in. You could do more. If you felt crafty, you could actually use your nail and punch a design, perhaps your initials, or something as fancy as Boonedockery across the side in order to allow a little airflow in. Go ahead and do that. The windshields are now in position. This is the ventilated side. This is the solid side. This is going to help our fuel to maximize its efficiency to boil our water. And as you can see, one side is going to allow adequate airflow in. One side is going to completely block any of the wind that comes through. Beautiful thing about these, they both remove easily, fit inside the stove for easy storage. Now, I'm going to show you how to make one for the stove when it's in its angled open position. In order to make a pattern for our next windshield, we'll be taking the measurement of the bottom width, the angled height, and the top width. Our bottom width is 9.5 centimeters. Our angled height is 4 centimeters. And our top width is going to be 5.5 centimeters. I'll go ahead and write those down. I've written down my measurements, and in order to formulate the math that I need to create the pattern, I took my angle height, which was 4 centimeters, and multiplied that by 3. That's going to give me a height of 12 centimeters. Plus, I'm going to add 1 centimeter for the fold tab. That will give me a grand total of 13 centimeters. Likewise, for the base width, I'm going to be adding 2 centimeters to the base width to facilitate my 2 folding tabs, which is going to give me a total of 11.5 centimeters. I'll go ahead and get the paper out and we'll start making our pattern. Now we're ready to draw our pattern, and we're going to start off with the width. And our width, after the calculation of adding our side folding tabs, is 11.5 inches. I'm going to create a tick mark here. I'm going to measure down for the height, and with the new height, with the addition of the 1 centimeter for the fold tab, is 13 centimeters. So I'll create a tick mark there. I'll move this right over, and we will align our ruler on the top TIG mark, measure down 13 centimeters, create another TIG mark, measure those 2 TIG marks across for our 11.5 measurement for the width, and create another TIG mark. I'm going to go ahead and draw the bottom line and the side line, creating our rectangle that we will be drawing the actual pattern in. Just like before, we're going to allocate on the sides 1 centimeter for the folding tabs. And we'll draw a line that connects the bottom of the rectangle to the top. We're going to measure down from the top, a distance of 1 centimeter for the top folding tab. We'll do that on both sides. Align our ruler and create the line going across the top. Our height was 4 centimeters. So we're going to measure down on each side, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 centimeters. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to go ahead and draw lines across those. The next step is finding the center of the top and the bottom. We had our original width, it was 9.5 centimeters. That is now going to translate into 4.75 centimeters for our halfway point. So find 4.75 on the top and 4.75 on the bottom. We're going to draw a line all the way from the bottom to the top. That's going to give us our center point. Now, we're not going to pay any attention to this space here. That's our folding tab. We're going to go down to the line just below it. That will be the top of our angled height, or excuse me, it's going to be the top of our top width, and that's 5.5 centimeters. So that will translate into 2.75 if we divide that by 2. And we'll align our ruler 2.75, and we're going to measure to the right and to the left of each one of those and create a TIG mark. And we will do that on the top and the bottom. Now, the top portion is now going to have to be angled to meet the bottom portion. And we're simply going to draw a line from there to the base corner. I'm going to use those TIG marks to create TIG marks in the bottom section. And we'll continue the angles from those two TIG marks to those. This accordion line will now be the edges of our windshield. We have our folding tab already marked off by the top width, and we'll just continue those to the top. That is now our top folding tab, and we will measure from the top angled sides out a distance of 1 centimeter on either end. Connecting those lines. We'll do that on both sides. And since my ruler is squared from the measurements of centimeters to inches, I can actually use that as a protractor or as a square to create the ends of our folding tabs. Now, these tabs don't have to be exactly precise. If you do not have a ruler like this, or you do not have a protractor, you do not have a square to be able to close those off, just give it a rough estimate and you should be good to go. So this is our drawn pattern. We're going to cut it out. Your angled windshield pattern should look like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to trace this on our aluminum. The patterns have been traced. Now it's time to cut them out. Our pattern has been traced on the aluminum. We've cut the aluminum blanks out. Now it's time to fold them. Just like we did before, I recommend rolling your aluminum foil until you align the bottom corners with the corners of your folding tabs. Once you have those in place, hold those down with your fingertips and gradually walk that back. Pat it down, and when it looks like you have a good fold, crease it down. We're going to fold that up again and aligning these two corners with the two corners that are at the top of the folding tabs. Again, roll your aluminum foil, especially with multiple layers. It will want to fold differently than it should. Hold that into position, pat it down, and crease it. Just like we did before with the side tabs, fold those bottom corners in just to create a smoother surface so we don't cut ourselves when we use them. Fold those in. On either side. Crease with our marker. Fold the sides in diagonally on either side. Fold that over and crease it down. Now, just like we did before, we are going to use the bottom portion, not the portion with the fold tabs, and we are going to measure that off 3 centimeters in from either side and create a 1 centimeter line up from that. And estimate 1 centimeter, and we'll check that real quick. Oh, look at that, I'm good. I'm good. Now, I'm going to go ahead and perforate those. And we do that to the next blank. Both of our blanks have been folded into windshields, and like I did before, I'm going to perforate one as a ventilated windshield, and one will be solid. One great thing about using the hole punch is that you create all kinds of little pretty silver confetti. Just think of all the wonderful craft ideas that could be generated just from those wonderful little aluminum circles. But anyway, let's go ahead and try the fit, see how it goes. Now we're going to test fit the angled windshields with our stove in the angled open position. Again, give it a little help on the side, clip that into position, sink her down in there, and on the, well, I like to turn her around that way with the folds inward. Yeah, perfect. And the ventilated windshield on this side. And we're going to angle our stove walls in. And that is the solid windshield. And this is the perforated windshield. Looks like I probably could have gotten at least this one over a little bit further, but it should do the trick. And if by any chance it doesn't, I can always add more perforations. Now, to show you the compactability of these wonderful little windshields, I have my solid fuel tabs. I have got my angled and my straight windshields. Hold those into position, fold them down, and bingo! Everything is self-contained. 2 pair of windshields and 4 fuel tabs, all ready to go to the woods. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking that's pretty dang dandy. Now it's time to test them out. We have just finished making 2 sets of windshields. One for the maximum open position and one for the angled open position. Ideally, what I'd like to do is go to the woods and try these out. Unfortunately today, the weather's almost 90 degrees and practically no breeze whatsoever. So it's a little difficult to test windshields without wind. But I had an idea. Here in the Bushcraft Laboratory, we have a lot of options available to us, and one of which is artificial wind. Let's try it. Now, we're ready for our experiment in the Bushcraft Laboratory with our solid fuel stove. Solid fuel is going to be placed in this stove in its maximum open position. The wind is going to be coming from this direction. So we'll go ahead and put the solid fuel tab in there. And my favorite part of the experiment will be lighting the storm match, as always. And we're going to give that just a second to get completely consumed by flames. It's working its way down just a little bit at a time, and as soon as it gets to the base, I'm going to turn the fan on its lowest setting and see what kind of an effect that would have. It should probably be equivalent to like a moderate breeze, not quite a strong breeze. Okay, it's completely engulfed in flames, and let's see what a mild wind would do. Oh, that's significant. That is significant. It's really fighting and struggling to stay ignited. And let's let it go back to no wind. Let it get completely consumed once again by flame. Looks good. I'm going to try it on the second setting of the fan. Oh, much more difficult. There are moments to where there's no flame whatsoever on the surface of the fuel tab. We'll go ahead and stop the fan. Let the fuel tab regain its composure. And it looks fully engulfed once more. Let's try for the third setting, which is the highest setting. Now, I don't know about you, but I definitely would not want to try to boil a pot of water over that. that would take a significant amount of time. So we can see that wind definitely affects the solid fuel in the stove, especially in this position. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the fan off. I'm going to extinguish the solid fuel tab. And what we're going to do next is I'm going to install one set of the windshields just to see how they perform. The windshields are in position. The fuel tab has been reignited. And I'm going to turn the fan on the lowest position. A little bit of fluttering, and I think most of that wind distortion is actually coming up from the bottom air vents of the stove. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And the fuel tab never lost any of the flame surrounding it. So I don't have to let it wait too long. Now, the second setting on the fan. Only minor gaps in the flame touching the fuel tab. This was even less than what it was on the lowest setting with no windshields. Okay, let that have its moment. Reignite the flames of love, per se. Now, let's go up to third setting. And this almost blew out the fuel tab on the last one. Keep in mind, folks, that this stove does not have a pot over it. If it had a pot over it, there would even be less air getting inside the stove. Less wind affecting the fuel tab. So as far as the rectangular full open position windshields go, I would say that these are incredibly successful. Let's go ahead and turn the fan off, and I'm going to set up the stove in its A-frame type position, the angled open position. The windshields for the angle open position have been installed. The fuel tab is fully ignited. Let's go ahead and see how the first setting on the fan goes. Very, very mild, very mild. Again, a lot of the air that is actually getting to it is actually from the vents that are on the bottom of the stove. Let it catch its breath. We're going to go to the second setting on the fan. The flame seems to be dancing around quite a bit, but it's actually performing better than the fully opened, because the fully opened at this setting was blowing the flame slightly away from the fuel tab, so you could actually see the fuel tab without flame. Let it rest a second. It's going strong. Going for the third setting on the fan. Again, the flame is dancing around. There are 0 openings in the flame exposing the bare, unignited fuel tab. In this position, there's virtually no effect on the fuel tab whatsoever. The flame is completely engulfed around it, and it's burning very, very well. So if you could imagine, you have your cook pot on there, you got your water in there, you have high winds. As long as you're able to get that fuel ignited initially to begin with, and with the storm match, you ignite it, you just drop it in there, put your pot on top of it. The storm match should definitely be enough to be able to ignite the fuel tab with the windshields in place to where it's going to be able to burn and burn well. You put your cook pot on top, and you're going to have probably as close to maximum efficiency as you possibly can for both the fuel and the fuel stove. Well, there you have it, folks. Super easy, super inexpensive way to maximize the use of your stove. It maximizes the fuel, it maximizes the efficiency of the stove itself, and for practically pennies. And something happens to it, you lose it, you accidentally tear it up somehow, you can make another one. I am so happy that I happened to see online a little article about the BCB Fire Dragon stove. It led me to order one. And it's a great stove in its own right. And I'll do a video on it sometime. But that little accessory of the windshield, absolutely brilliant. And by just using a little bit of ingenuity, some stuff you have laying around the house, you can even make that one accessory into something even better on your own. I hope you enjoyed this. I had a great time doing it. And I've got a lot of other do-it-yourself projects that I'd like to share with you as well. And we'll do those later on down the road. If you liked the video, hit like. If you didn't, well, you can dislike it, I guess. It'd make me sad. But that's okay. You can do it. If you don't like it, just give me that thumbs down. But if you do, I deeply would appreciate you explaining why in the comments, because all this is new and I want to get better at it. I'd like to do things that folks like to see and that I like to do. If you could help me out like that, I'd appreciate it. If you're interested in what I've been doing here on YouTube, click subscribe. If you want to keep up to date on what I've been doing, hit that notifications bell and you'll get all the updates. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.